do. The government's advisors on genetic fingerprinting have been told that people are being arrested simply to get their samples onto the national DNA database. The government says the rules are adequate, but it's being claimed that 3/4 of young black men may now be on the DNA database. Richard Watson has been trying to find out how they feel about it.
DNA profiling has been an incredibly powerful tool, but today's report claims the national database has been transformed from a DNA store for offenders into a database of suspects. Today's report suggests that as many as 75% of young black men in Britain are on the police DNA database. This is a huge figure. Could it be explained by the fact that young black men are disproportionately guilty of crime, or is it evidence that the police are disproportionately targeting this ethnic minority? James Easy is a university graduate with a first-class degree in politics, but he has first-hand experience of being placed on the database, dating back to a minor playground fight when he was just 11.
I was taken down to the station, I was fingerprinted, they took my DNA with a swab, and I was cautioned, and I never heard anything since.
So as far as you're concerned, your DNA could well be on the database?
Yeah, still could be there.
There are almost 5 million profiles on the database. More than 20% are from minors under 18, like James. In England and Wales, profiles are taken on arrests for any offences carrying a possible prison sentence. They're retained indefinitely, irrespective of whether or not the person is charged. In Scotland, DNA profiles are only retained if the individual is convicted or charged with a sexual or violent offence. Last year, only 283 profiles from England and Wales were removed, whereas more than 16,000 Scottish profiles were deleted. Many DNA entries are made following arrests for stop and search, even if there's no further action. The suggestion on the face of it is pretty extraordinary. 3/4 of young black men on the DNA database.
It is an extraordinary statistic, but when you consider that black people are 7 to 8 times more likely to be stopped and searched by the police than if you're white, then you're beginning to wonder whether those statistics are actually true.
The Human Genetics Commission report took evidence from a retired police officer who claimed that people are being stopped simply to swell the entries into the database. But this was dismissed by the Association of Chief Police Officers, which said tonight that any suggestion that using powers of arrest to obtain DNA has become routine policy is plainly wrong.
That response will not be adequate to put aside the perception by some members of the public that there is an issue here. I think what we would be better coming from ACPO is to say that, you know, that the police forces up and down the country will actually be investigating these concerns to try and win back the public confidence.
So with the soldiers on the hair...
So how's this all playing in the wider community? We're invited to the offices of Liberty in Brixton, London today to speak with some of the young volunteers. They're preparing for the next issue of the magazine Live. Coming from all backgrounds, they're given the responsibility here to develop their media skills.
It shouldn't be about the ethnicity of the crime, of the people that commit the crime. I think it should be about the crime itself. Crime is crime.
If the person's been proven to be innocent, then there's no need for their samples to be on the database.
One man told me the police pressurised his friend to give a DNA sample without arresting him. That would be contrary to the rules.
One of the police officers asked one of my friends if he could take a swab and just put it in his mouth just for the database, and he didn't want to do it, obviously, because he was like, well, you're not asking any of my friends to do it, but you're asking me, and he was like, just a procedure.
So he actually had the mouth swab?
Yeah, he had the mouth swab, so done that through, and then just got let go.
So that was just on suspicion? He wasn't arrested or taken to the police station?
No, he wasn't taken to the station on that point, we were just let go.
The police firmly reject any suggestion they're unfairly targeting young black men, saying tonight that overrepresentation in the database is likely to result from overrepresentation in the criminal justice system. In other words, young black men commit more crime, they argue. One radical solution to tackle alleged discrimination would be to place everybody on the DNA database. In certain circumstances, some lawyers would support such a move.
If everyone was on the database, it removes the problem of discrimination, And in a sense, it would no longer be a kind of stigma. It could be seen as something that we agree as a society to do because we think we should all make some contribution towards fighting violent crime. But I'd emphasise, there's no way that I'd emphasise that with the current, anything like the arrangements for the current database. We need new legislation and we need strong safeguards before we even think about something like that.
Interestingly, the 18-year-old editor of Live magazine agrees.
Whether you're homeless, whether you're middle class, whether you're working class, everyone makes a mistake. So I believe to forget about prejudice and no one can make excuses, put everyone in the DNA database, which they want to do, and everyone will be happy.
There is widespread understanding that DNA has been a remarkable tool, solving almost 400,000 crimes in the past decade, according to the Home Office. But today's report has caused concern, and the Home Affairs Select Committee announced it will be carrying out an inquiry into the national database.
Well, with us now is the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Grayling. If you've done nothing wrong, you've nothing to fear, have you?
Well, I take a very simple view on this, that you are innocent until proven guilty. It's a fundamental principle of our criminal justice system.
No proof of guilt to be on a DNA database.
Well, I think there are a large number of people in our society who feel that they have been stigmatised if they are put onto a DNA database when they've done nothing wrong. You find not examples simply like the ones we've just seen in the film, but numerous cases, different circumstances where somebody helps with an investigation, where they've been arrested under a false charge of shoplifting which isn't pursued to the courts, they've been stopped and searched in the streets, their DNA is left on a database.
So
I don't think that's wrong.
About 5 million people on the database now. Yeah. How many shouldn't be there?
Well, at the moment, what we're seeing is the database is growing quite rapidly, and the number of crimes solved using DNA is actually dropping. So the evidence is quite clear that a growth in the number on the database doesn't actually lead to an increase in the number of crimes solved using DNA.
You're not surely going to be foolish enough to argue that it has no value?
I wouldn't for a second argue it has no value. I think DNA is an extremely important tool
then shouldn't be
in crime fighting. Well, the reality is there is a substantial proportion. I can give you the exact number because I don't know
I'm not asking
on the
for an
database.
Exact, just a proportion roughly. I mean, it went up about 40% last year, didn't it?
It went up by 1 million people. The number of crimes solved using DNA is about 60,000 over the course of the year, at the most recent that we've got available. I would guess that there are several million people, 1, 2, 3 million people on there who have not committed an offence.
And therefore shouldn't be on it.
And therefore should not be on it.
And what do you say to the argument that if we were all on it, there would be no stigma attached?
Well, there are a lot of ways in which you could say that if we had a national database in a whole variety of different ways, it would strengthen crime fighting, but you have to achieve a balance between the interests of crime fighting and the interests of civil liberties. And I would argue that putting us all into a national database creates yet another structure of intrusion into our lives that's inappropriate. And there's no evidence that having a large number more items of DNA on our database actually leads to more crimes being solved. The opposite is the case.
There is plenty of evidence of cases that have only been solved because somebody happened to turn up on the DNA database. Take the case of, Sally Ann Downey, for example, only trapped because the bloke is involved in some sort of pub fight. Hardly a serious offence.
There are very few cases like that.
There are.
No system is 100% perfect.
Even one counts, doesn't it?
Well, trial by jury.
Sally Ann Bowman, sorry.
Trial by jury is not a perfect system, and it will cause mistakes from time to time, but nobody argues we shouldn't have it. I think it is wrong to keep the data of innocent people on a DNA database indefinitely. What I've argued for, and what we would do in government, is the Scottish system, which seems to me to achieve the right balance, where for minor offences we do not retain the data, and where for more serious investigations, like a rape investigation or a murder investigation, the police can keep the DNA on file for up to 5 years.
But you could still be picked up in an investigation for a serious crime, violence or a sexual offence, for example, be entirely innocent and still find that as an entirely innocent human being, your DNA is on the database.
Well, the reality is that where you've got an extended and complicated case, the judgment has been in the Scottish system, and it's one I endorse, that there you need to give the police the flexibility to retain DNA for a longer period. The difference is, in the current situation, that DNA is stored indefinitely. I don't think that's right. I think that needs to change. And I certainly don't think, even though we managed to get in the government in that direction now, I do not think we should be retaining the DNA of people who've done nothing wrong at all, been accused of minor crimes, perhaps not even crimes at all. I don't think we should be storing that DNA at all.